you for this week of Makeover Monday. I'm Eva, and if you're new to these sessions that happen typically every week on a Wednesday evening UK time, then welcome. This is a chance to get some feedback on your visualizations that you built for Makeover Monday. We're always going to focus on the current week. So this week we are focusing on a really interesting data set. Let me share my screen. So here you see the viz that was taken as the starting point. How cost effective is your high protein diet? So that is something that Andy picked for this week, a bar chart with some images on it, and the question, how much does 30 grams of protein cost? So the idea, of course, with Maker Monday is to take this starting point and say, what could I do that's better, maybe more effective, simpler, prettier, however you want to approach that, to create your own makeover. If you're curious, makeovermonday.co.uk/data is where you will find the data. So you go to week 8, which is this week's. You'll find a link to the original article. In addition, here's a chart, the data source, who was prepared by, so that's Brittany Rose now, who might be tuned in, but if not, then hi to Brittany from afar. A link to the data set. So the data is prepared for you. You don't really need to do any data prep unless you want to add some extra stuff to it, but the data you need for the viz is already there. There's a link to the Watch Me Viz session that Andy does on Mondays, where he builds his Makeover Monday visualization live streamed on YouTube. People can follow along. It's really a chance to learn and to observe him do what he does best, really, and to learn some tips and tricks on how he uses Tableau and how he approaches analysis and visualization. So that's where the data is. We've seen the original bar chart. Now we're heading over to Twitter and to the visualizations for this week. So I'm searching for the Makeover Monday hashtags. Let me just make sure that this displays okay. Should be fine. For those of you who are on the live stream, feel free to say hello. Pop something in the chat if you like, where you're dialing in from, what you thought of this week's data set, whether you've done the viz or not. So we are looking at the latest so that we can filter it down to this week's submission or submissions. So let's have a look at Imani's viz. Sometimes the thumbnail from Tableau Public doesn't really come through nicely. I don't know what the reason is for that, but let's have a look. So Imani has created this viz, and I'm just going to let me just quickly double check. Yeah, it's a bit small for you guys. So let me just zoom in a bit. High protein diet. Is that what it's about? Let me just quickly have a look. So, okay, how cost effective is it? Okay, understood. High protein diet. What's the best value for your buck? That's quite like, what do you call it? Like slang language to call it buck. It's not really what everyone would understand, especially non-native speaker. If somebody said to me many years ago, before I lived in English-speaking countries, how many bucks do you have? I'd be like, I don't know what a buck is. And what I probably would have assumed first is that it has something to do with a buck it's like a deer or antelope, like a male, rather than currency or money. So I would say keep it to something a bit, well, don't make it formal necessarily, but what's the best value for your money is a perfectly fine title, and everyone will then understand it. I think if you use the word buck, then it should be in the context of what people may be more familiar with, like best bang for your buck. I think that's something people would have heard, but best value for your buck isn't really commonly used, at least not in the many years I've come across it. So we have a scatter plot, but we don't have an explanation. So we have labels. So we have total protein per package. So this is in grams. So it's so that's the protein in a package. But then what size is the package? Like, is chicken breast one chicken breast, or is it a package of chicken breasts? And if I buy them here, they could be 1 pound in weight, they could be 2 pounds, they could be 3 pounds. What is this? And now this might have been done badly in the original. I don't know what's in the data set, so you might have to just explain that. But also skim milk Is that a liter, 2 liters, a gallon? I don't know. So while we're looking at grams of protein in each of these products, I don't know if we're actually comparing like for like. So what does package mean? And then cost per 20 grams of protein. So that is more comparable, right? Because we're looking at the cost for each of these items for 20 grams of protein. So this is in US dollars. Okay, so we have a scatter plot. We have some different colored things. So we have green things, blue, red, and yellow, but I don't know what the colors mean. Egg whites in the carton, canned chicken. So that's red. So I thought, oh, maybe this is chicken-derived things, but there's eggs that are yellow and there's chicken that's green. So what's the reasoning for the color? I make the assumption it's the quadrant, but the quadrants aren't labeled. So what do the colors correspond to? And what do you want me to do on the left? I guess you want me to filter, but why? Like there's no instructions, there's a chart and there's things that aren't explained, but that should be explained because they're not self-explanatory. Now, I can spend a lot of time figuring it out myself, but then I might as well do all the work myself. If I look at a visualization, I want it to tell me something, and at the moment, I don't really know what it's trying to tell me. So salmon has 91 grams of protein per package, whatever that package is, at $2.35 for 20 grams of protein. That already makes my brain kind of hurt. So, but what does it mean? Is like when you say what's the best value for your buck, what is the answer to that question? Because you haven't answered it. I don't know if salmon is a good value for my money when it comes to protein content, and also what's a high protein diet. So what if I want to say, okay, my diet has so much percent or so many grams of protein per day, is that high? Is that low? Is that medium? And yeah, so too many open questions. I have more questions now than I did before. Let's move to Takafumi's. There's cheapest way to get your protein. There's a link. And hi, Brittany, and hi, Merit. Nice to see you joining live this review. Okay, let's have a look. Takafumi has created. Okay, so we've got a nice long viz. So we've got a slope chart. The cheapest ways to get your protein. Vegan, vegetarian. Again, give me some context. Tell me what I'm looking at. The title says something, but the cheapest ways to get your protein, is chicken it? Because the color suggests it might be, but I don't know. And the question, vegan or vegetarian, yes or no, like, do you want me to choose that? Or are you telling me none of these are vegan, vegetarian? No, I know the answer to those questions, but I'm trying to raise those questions to show you that it's not obvious for people who are not familiar with how to interact with these visualizations. So let's pick vegan protein sources. Oh, this is quite limited, isn't it? So there's black beans, there's tofu, and there's peanuts. How predictable. And the interesting thing is it talks about, I mean, obviously the data set is limited to the cheapest ways, or, you know, like how much it costs you to get your protein. I wouldn't want to get all my protein from peanuts because that's not necessarily healthy. Even if I were to say, well, let's say 20 grams of protein is what I'm aiming for, that's super healthy. Do I just want to eat peanuts for that? No, because they have very little fiber, they have a lot of fat, and maybe that's not what I'm aiming for. If I wanted to do that, I would rather go for black beans or for tofu, actually tofu. And between you and me, I would deep fry it because it's delicious. But that aside, I guess, you know, it's not really about healthy, it's more about the price for the amount. But let's go back and let's say vegetarian. I like the transitions. I do, let me actually say that. I do like how tidy and clean this viz is. I think the labels could be a little bit, actually, let me make this a bit smaller. The labels could be larger. So if I go down to 100%, they're tiny. The font size is really small. And I keep saying this because my vision isn't bad. I wear glasses, but I could read this all without problem without glasses. But they're really small and it's exhausting to read. And I'm the kind of person now who zooms in on everything on my screen because I don't want to strain my eyes to read something. I don't want to lean forward and get bad posture from sitting at my desk all day reading things. Visualization is a way to give people access to information very easily, but don't make that access hard by making it impossible to read things. So make this a bit larger. You've got the space. There's a lot of white space here. It could be narrower and it could be larger font as well. I like the detail. I like how it's formatted and laid out. So that's really nice. Okay, so we've got, so tofu seems to be the cheapest. I don't understand why Waze is pink rather than cheapest. Because isn't that, well, I guess it's not the cheapest, but why is tofu now pink? I don't understand that. Oh, it's just my selection. So I don't understand the coloring, because I think if you want to highlight something with color, then maybe it should be whatever answers your question. So if we think of this title as a question, what's the cheapest way? Then the color should point to that. Otherwise, the color isn't really adding much value. String cheese, that cracks me up. I've known of string cheese for a few years now, but that is a very American product. I've never seen it anywhere else, which also doesn't necessarily mean anything because I don't eat cheese. But let's have a look. We have, okay, this is not a tableau maker one day or maker one day. This is a different topic. Shavira, okay. Let me open this image in a different tab. Let me zoom in. And now I can't really read it well because it's all blurry. So it's fine to share an image. The problem is if the image is quite small and that's all I can go by because I'm trying to make it, large enough for you guys to see. It's quite blurry. You are more than welcome to share the link. Now, I like that it contains all the different, the different categories. So the different items, it's got meat, it's got dairy and plant-based sources, and then it splits it into vegan and non-vegan. What I don't understand is the Viz says the cheapest ways, but they're very different in terms of the price. But also, it doesn't actually tell you the price. Like the price is in the bar, so I can't actually compare the price because the bars, the dominating feature is the length of the bars and the color, and that really focuses on how much protein is in in each package or in each portion. So what is the cheapest? I need to see what's the lowest number, and I don't get the answer, unfortunately, because it's too hard. So, okay. Next is Izumi. So maybe the lesson here is, be careful when you visualize stuff, especially when you include a question, make sure that your viz always answers the question, because otherwise people will be like, oh, I don't actually still know the answer. So it's a really weird biceps. Yeah, okay. So how much will you spend on protein? Okay, how much will I spend on protein? It's very small font. I'm going to zoom in because I can't read it. Menu. Okay, so there's a few options. There's skim milk, there's whole milk. They have the same icon. The eggs have the same icon. The cows all have the same icon. So I have to do a lot of reading the details to understand what the different options are. But how much will I spend on protein? So skim milk, it has a carrot for vegetarian, and it says $0.7. Is that for a carton of milk, or is it for the protein in like okay, so with skim milk you will lose $4. You wouldn't lose it, you would spend it. You don't lose it. That's not the right wording. You will lose $4.29 per package. You will get 133 grams of protein per package. But that's if you drink the entire bottle of milk. So let's say tuna. So there's an overall average of 104 grams for these different protein things. How did you calculate the overall average? I don't know. Because it doesn't look like any of these. Pork tenderloin has 115 grams. But how does the 108, 104, so this number down here, how does that come about? Because I don't believe it. Because I would imagine that how is that calculated? Because there's only one item that had over 100 grams. Oh, whey protein powder. So yeah, you would get 696 grams per package, but you wouldn't consume that in one go. Yeah, the overall average, I don't really know if that's in any way meaningful, because like what does that really mean? What does it tell us? And yeah, I'm just struggling a bit with the story on the right side. Okay, so we've got cheddar cheese. We're spending $3.19. Can this not be done a bit simpler? Because that's a lot of me reading through and hovering over these different things. Could this not be done a bit more simply and less gimmicky, so that I focus on the information rather than the images in this biceps growing? That would be my suggestion there. So let's switch to vegan, just because we'll have fewer options. Okay, extra firm tofu. Okay, yeah, a bit too playful for me. It doesn't really give me a lot of clarity. So how much would I spend on protein? Okay, I can spend $3.79 on a package of peanuts, but what does that mean? Is that good? Is that a cheap source? Is that an effective source of protein or not? I don't get that answer. Okay, Satoshi. Let's have a look at this viz. Okay. Why is it just not open up? Here we go. Something has gone wrong. Of course it has. Okay, let's just look at the picture. It's very blurry because, well, oh, hang on, I've zoomed in, so let me zoom out a bit. Yeah, so this is the problem if I go to 100%. Again, why are these fonts so small? I mean, admittedly, my screen is big, but yeah, that's just really small if I have to zoom into 150% to fill my tab, my window here. Okay, so how much do 20 grams of protein cost, rather than does 20 grams of protein cost? Cost of 20 grams of protein by source. Hallelujah. This is actually an answer. So comparing 20 grams of protein, across all of these, it's a common denominator. So that means we can actually compare all these different protein sources or these different foods. So yeah, so basically it goes from most expensive to cheapest, and it just depends. Do you want to focus on the most expensive ones first or the cheapest ones first? But I like that it's nice and simple. It just tells us exactly how we can compare those different foods based on their protein content and the price. So I think this is really effective. I don't think you'll need all those colors necessarily, especially the two different greens are not very different. So you could maybe make, well, I don't know if you really need the color, but I do agree that it's useful to add. So you could alternatively say, highlight vegetarian sources or highlight vegan sources. And vegetarian and vegan, you could just say vegan, because if it's vegan, it's automatically vegetarian, just not the other way around. So you could have just non-veg, vegetarian, and vegan. And I would make the colors a bit more distinct because they blur a bit, especially the 2 shades of green. Okay, well done. Virgin has also done this. Nowadays, non-vegetarian protein sources are generally more expensive. I agree, and it does stand out with the canned chicken, the salmon. But how do I know which sources are non-vegetarian? Because I thought at first maybe all the red ones are, but Greek yogurt is kind of red-ish, string cheese also red-ish, and it's not. So these are not meat, and then you have blue things that I thought maybe those are the veggie ones. There's peanuts, yep, but then there's also chicken legs. So here it says skim milk and peanuts are the cheapest vegetarian and/or vegan alternatives, but chicken legs is the same color as vegan. So you've done your colors based on the price, but that's very confusing because you're also highlighting in color the types or the categories of food. So color has 2 meanings, and that's just too confusing. I think here, as much as it might sound boring, a bar chart would work better because if you think back to the previous one we just looked at, the non-vegetarian sources were all at the top as being the most expensive. And if that is your key takeaway, and if that's the message you want to send, having those non-vegetarian protein sources at the top of a bar chart is the most obvious way to display that information and will probably be the most easily understood by your audience. Okay, let's see if there's some more. Okay, so I don't know what the name of this person is, but let's find out. I still don't know because I don't see that in the details anywhere. So what are the most readily available and most muscle building foods? Well, food actually doesn't really build the muscle. Like, yeah, the protein, helps build the muscle, but you still have to do the work to build the muscle. It's not just eating the foods and you will get jacked, because otherwise we wouldn't have so many obese people on high protein diets. They would all be super muscular. So the food helps repair the muscles and strengthen them, but muscle building really happens in the gym. Okay, so we have non-veggie, vegetarian and vegan. So we've got gray, and these color choices, I think they're really good because the yellow makes me think of cheese and dairy, the green makes me think of plants, and the gray is a nice neutral color. Now, if there's a question, like I said before, make sure your Viz answers it, and it doesn't, unfortunately. What are the most readily available? Well, that depends where you live, right? I can go to the supermarket and buy any of these things. Somebody else, the supermarket might be a 3-hour drive away, so it's not readily available. I think what is meant here is what are the cheapest the cheapest sources of protein and those foods that contain the highest amount, because it says grams per cost and cost per package. It's too simplistic for me because there's no labeling, there's no indication of what I'm looking at. There's a big yellow blob, whey protein powder, but it doesn't grams per cost. I don't even know what that. So 16 grams per cost. What's the cost? Is that per dollar? But yeah, there's no labeling, there's no description. That is something to update. The median, what's the point? Like, literally, what's the use of the median here? And the whole Viz is a little bit too large, so of course I can shrink that to 100%, but it's really wide and it doesn't really tell me anything. So I would update a few of those things. Okay, yes, we have a link for another Viz. So this is by Steiner, buying protein. Well, you don't really buy protein, you buy food. Skim milk, chicken legs, and peanuts are best bang for buck. No, are most cost effective when looking for protein-rich foods. That's how I would say it. I actually personally have it's a pet peeve of mine that we as a society have come to compartmentalize food into carbs, protein, and fat because there's so much more to it. but also we need so much more to live on, and I just think it takes away the enjoyment of food. Like if somebody described cheese to me as, oh, I'm eating protein for lunch. No, you're eating cheese that happens to have protein in it, but most foods do have fat, carbs, and proteins. So let's not get well, not my place to judge, but you don't buy protein, you buy the foods that contain protein, and that is just simply incorrect. You don't buy protein. Price of 20 grams of protein by food, family, and source. Yep, that's fine. So the family, so we have dairy, I suppose, grains, meat, nuts. But that's an acorn, that's not a nut. Well, technically, it could be a nut, could be a seed. I don't know actually what acorns technically are. But this doesn't make me think of something I would eat, because that's more something I would find on the ground and that squirrels would eat. So if it's a nut, I would maybe put like a walnut or a cashew or something. And there's only peanuts in this category anyway in this data set, so maybe use a peanut. And then there's seafood. Okay, so how do I now see that skim milk, chicken legs, and peanuts are most cost effective? Is it because they are all on the far left, in which case I would highlight them more? I think it's fine to use those dots, but maybe you could just use a shaded band, the reference band, that goes from, whatever the lowest value is. So it's 0.65, 0.6. They're all pretty much the same price, but just to highlight, this is how you can see that they are the cheapest or the most cost-effective protein sources in this data set. Because those three things, while I can look for the color, I then still have to read all the entries on the left and make sure I pick the right dot to see, oh, do I agree with what you've said? So if you highlight that, I think that makes it instantly a bit easier to understand. Also make sure to put your name on the viz, so that if somebody downloads a picture or something, you have your credentials on there. Because currently it just has the data source. And the data source actually is not data.world. The data source is, I come on the website, and it is Lifehacker. So Andy literally puts all of this in there so that you don't get it wrong. So make sure to include the right data source. Data.world is simply where we host it. Okay. I think we have time. Oh, we might have time for one more. So let's have a look. JS Subashini, I think. How much does 20 grams of protein cost? Hover on a pie to filter. What's the pie? Veggie, vegan, others. So this needs to be explained more. So, there are, because this is just, the data set is fairly small, right? It's not all the potential things you could buy, all the foods. So you could just say, there's different types of vegetarian, vegan, and non-vegetarian sources that contain protein. And then is this the average price? Yeah, average price is 120 for 20 grams of protein. I wouldn't really include the average because they are such different things. So an extra large egg is probably for one egg, whereas for whole milk, 85. The sizes are different, so they might be per package, but they are also not portion sizes. So if you look at canned chicken, hang on, no, where was it? Chicken breast. I think chicken breast was £1 price per pound. Maybe, I don't know, but I saw that somewhere. That was price per pound. Now, you probably wouldn't eat a whole pound of chicken, but that's also very different from, a glass of milk or something. So the prices aren't really comparable unless you compare them across portion sizes, because they contain different amounts of water and calories and stuff. So it's not like the 65 cents you pay for chicken legs is going to fill you up to the same level that maybe a bag of peanuts will, or a can of tuna or something. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, again, this needs more description. And with that, we are at the end of our time. I am going to head off, but it was great seeing people tuned in. I hope you got something from this feedback. You're welcome to leave some more comments if you have questions later on, because I know that Andy checks the comments as well. And if there's any specific questions on this data set and the things we talked about, then please let us know. And with that, have a great rest of your week. And I probably won't talk to you next week, at least not on Wednesday, because I'm traveling, but I will be back soon with another Viz review. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.